Hello and welcome to the 117th, I think, dev update. I told myself I was going to look up the number beforehand. I've lost track the last 3 times. With me again, returning. She didn't have enough the first time. Is Reva from Cornell, who is a CIS major. How are you doing today?
Good. How are you, Andre? Happy to be here again.
Thanks so much for coming. You're also the I can't leave out. You're also the vice president of the Cornell Blockchain. Right? VP?
Spot on.
Spot on. Fantastic. Well, speaking of that, welcome. First of all, congratulations on a successful semester of school.
Thank you.
I understand you're taking a couple weeks off before you head to, I won't mention the name, but a very prestigious internship in New York City.
Yeah, so excited to get to relax for a couple weeks and then head over to New York in literally June 1st. And so excited for that, but lot to learn in the meantime.
All right, so let's dive in. So Cornell Blockchain Conference was 3 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I've lost track of time.
That?
It could be 5 years ago for all I remember.
Same here.
But let me switch our view here, so people can see. You're not going to be able to see this, but people may. Here we go. So I want to know what happened. Why don't you start with that? Let's give people a recap that missed the first one. What is a Cornell blockchain? What does it do, and what was it this year?
Awesome. So Cornell Blockchain is basically a club on campus, and we basically host a bunch of educational opportunities to sort of help people learn about the blockchain space on campus and have sort of a home-based community to come back to. And we're heavily focused on community learning and community development, as obviously one would sort of assume as we're a campus club, but we really pride ourselves on offering unique opportunities that people wouldn't get otherwise. And so we have a consulting team, we have a governance team, we have an education team, and we also run an accelerator, which has been fantastic this past year. And something that we wanted to work on was how can we sort of bring this community to life, as we'll do a lot of our events with people that are remotely. And obviously because of Zoom, we're able to do a lot more just with orgs that are in the space, like hosting developer workshops. But we wanted to figure out how could we facilitate this experience in person and also include the New York community. And so we ended up hosting this is our 4th annual conference, coupled with Cornell Tech, which has always been a super fun opportunity. And we put together a conference for this year, 800 attendees, which was crazy to say.
That was amazing. A lot of people there.
Yeah, a lot of people. And we basically host a day-long event filled with collective learning as the most kind of mission of it. And we basically have conversations from ZK all the way to like permissionless markets, which I think was really fun this year. And it was really, really fun. It was definitely like a process. We've been in the works of planning this since December. And so it's really crazy to see it come to life.
How do you do that? How do you do this and go to school with how many of our credits you guys take? This is a crazy feat.
Wait,
did you sleep at all?
It's insane. The day before, me and Leah, who's my president, probably slept for like 5 hours and we were up. It is definitely a lot, but it's so worth it. I mean, it's cool to get to see people that you followed on Twitter, for example, for years and years, come in person just because you've invited them and speak. And I think that was just so magical, where it was cool to see people who I've heard speak years ago on podcasts, get to reach out to them and share that we're hosting this conference and see if they wanted to come join us. And I think that was super cool. And it was also cool to meet a bunch of other students. We had students from all over the country come, from UT Austin to people from California to speakers that are from Portugal, just a vast variety. And I think that made it just really, really cool. And just also diversified sort of the narrative as well that we had there, and sort of helped it be a little broader rather than just very NYC centric. But we had a lot of fun. It was a lot of different conversations. I think a lot of different topics, perspectives that we haven't actually had before. And we haven't always had this much chain representation. And so I think that was kind of a huge thing that we really worked on this year, was incorporating a lot of other chains. While we do also want to really promote things that have stemmed also from the university, how can we also ensure that the conversations aren't leaving folks out who are also critical players to the development of the space?
I mean, you had a panel on digital fashion and NFTs and luxury goods. That's pretty That's pretty
Yeah.
unique and specific there. That's interesting. I have the webpage up with all the events here so people can
Mm,
see this while we're chatting. What was your let's start with the big picture. What was your big takeaway from the event?
that's a really good question. I think for me, one of the so me and some of the other organizers, kind of some of our job was honestly running around to ensure that all the speakers knew where to get to. And we were sort of a lot of people's point of contacts. And so I didn't get to listen to that many panels as I would have wished to. However, with that said, I did get to go to a couple at the end of the day, and then I moderated actually one of my own. I moderated Web3 growth, which was really fun, which took place at around noon. And then the one that I spent a lot of time listening to was permissionless markets, which happened at around 4 p.m. And that one was held by Jane Lippincott, who's partner at Andreessen Horowitz, with Dee, who runs Zora, Chase, who runs head of brand at Uniswap, and then two other folks that were added um, relatively later into the game just because of other scheduling conflicts that came up. But I want to say um, I'm gonna not even fully recall, but essentially what was super cool about that panel was shifting the conversation into obviously a lot of crypto is about monetization, right? And sort of ensuring with blockchain that people who are active contributors are essentially having a way to sort of get rewarded within a greater ecosystem. And what I thought was super cool about permissionless markets was there's a lot of markets that we play in, right? Whether that's social media or traditional markets for stocks or traditional markets even just for buying goods that we see. However, a lot of times our participation isn't necessarily rewarded, right? And ultimately, the one that organizes or facilitates that market takes home all the money. So we see that with traditional social media a lot as well, right? And what I really loved about that panel was how can we sort of shift the conversation to reward all constituents or all stakeholders? And obviously, with decentralized social media, there's a lot of conversation about if I were to upload something, right? Let's say you upload something, Andre. I go in, I like it on Zora, for example. If I like it, and let's say I have more followers than you, just a random example, and I drive some of my channel into sort of the post that you've posted, how can I also take a cut of those profits that you sort of rake home as well, right? And so I think just sort of shifting the narrative in terms of like what one, that blockchain isn't just crypto, right? I think that also is an important narrative. Obviously, most people already know that, but I think there's a couple of people that like degens or people that sort of play around and pump and dump don't necessarily always understand that we're thinking about a different database that we've traditionally seen. And I think also figuring out a way that we can sort of have inherent accountability and transparency into what people are doing and that we're able to effectively then reward them, I think is super cool. Or obviously also not just reward them, but also ensure that people are getting the credit that they deserve, specifically in the creator economy. And so I think that was a really exciting concept for me.
What were the suggestions? So I know in at least in our ecosystem, at least with NFTs, we have something called a royalty system that is enforced at the smart contract layer. So you cannot spend a box with an NFT in it to send it anywhere without splitting some of that revenue back to the original creator of the content.
Cool.
How did your Web3 people or your other panel talk about actually with immutable contracts kind of enforcing that?
So Zora already does that, and Zora
Okay.
does a pretty awesome job at sort of having a fixed royalty fee that they collect.
So no, but that's not what's it called? That's still custodialship. That's still somebody pushing the buttons and figuring out and revoking if they need to and that kind of thing. I'm talking about was there a solution before that was permissionless that is immutable that nobody can change, it's in motion and there's nobody can stop it or shut it down.
So I want to say that whenever you mint or share something on Zora, there is a contract that automatically goes in and gives that person their designated reward, if that makes sense.
Okay, cool, cool. So there's a
So
contract minted
there is, yeah.
per post. Okay. Very
And then
cool.
every time you like something or you mint something, most of the mints are very, very, very low in terms like maybe 2 cents or 3 cents. My numbers might be wrong, but I think most of those proceeds are going directly to the creator. The platform is collecting a very minimal amount. And so they've been giving millions of dollars back to creators in the last couple of months, which we haven't seen before, especially at such a grand level, right? And so I think that was sort of really cool to see. And also, I think people are also realizing that, like, for example, whatever effort they do within a particular market, they also can deserve some sort of compensation. It shouldn't be the company just raking home all the funds, right? Like
Mhm.
we do with traditional social media.
Right, right. I mean, that's one of the things that content creators unfortunately they're aware of it, but it's hard to fight against that when they're actually the ones creating content and money for and revenue for the big guys like YouTube and TikTok
Totally.
and Instagram, but they are still kind of powerless in that matter.
Absolutely.
Even if they ban it up, there's probably 50,000 other people that just jump up right after them and come in and do the
Absolutely.
same thing they did. So
But what I
it's
think is cool
interesting.
is I never really thought about how some of these mechanisms can exist on chain, right? And I think it was cool to see that a lot of these ideas that we talk about are being brought to life, and there are builders heavily building a lot of these sort of ecosystems that we want to see out with and sort of are gaining traction, which I think that in general was just an exciting conversation that came to mind.
That's pretty darn neat. I'll have to check that out. I haven't used that platform, but that sounds is that on Ethereum? What is that? Or some
Yeah.
side chain?
It's on Ethereum, and then you can
So
also
it's not
use
like $100 to mint an NFT or
oh
mint a
my god, it's so low. You can use Base and you can also use Optimism.
okay,
It's
okay.
very, very, very low fees.
Very neat, very neat. All right, so that was your big takeaway from the things that you saw. What about what kind of feedback did you get? How do you collect feedback? I must have missed the email about feedback.
We do collect feedback. We actually have like the last during the closing ceremony, we have a huge feedback form that we collect from a lot of folks. And then we also have we ask a lot of our panelists for feedback as well. Um, and so you probably got an email from me, Andre, that you maybe didn't respond to of collecting feedback, but
I
all
wouldn't
good.
doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
No, no, no.
So what was a big takeaway from the guests, from the panelists?
Okay, so
Was there a difference in what the panelists perceived, how the blockchain went, and what they were able to deliver versus what the audience saw and heard?
I think it was pretty matched. I think some of our bigger takeaways were we were run so most conferences for context that are student run, they normally have one programming event every hour. So there's one main stage and you have four people or a panel or a keynote that rotates every hour. For us, we ended up having four events happening concurrently almost
Yeah,
every
I'm looking
hour.
at it right now. It's absolutely crazy. Yeah.
And I think that pushed us very thin, right? Because if there's tech difficulties, and naturally a lot of these are going to come up, and we tried to be on top of it. And so we think it was pretty seamless, but it wasn't like for the audience, but maybe it wasn't as seamless for us on the organizing end. But I think throughout the end of the day, like also like people who come at 9 a.m., they're probably not going to stay until 5 p.m. Right. And so it's like you have errand people in the morning that'll trickle out throughout the day. And so I think it's just sort of figuring out um how to sort of juggle a lot of these different things, right? So I think one would be reducing the numbers of programs and keynotes. I think that would make it a lot easier to sort of facilitate for next year. And then also ensuring that like if people are coming at 8:30 or 8 a.m., they're probably not going to stay until 5 p.m. on a Friday in New York City. So sort of how can we facilitate this sort of conference and ensure that people are sort of getting the conversations they care most about in the morning, and then also having conversations that are equally as relevant for people that maybe that come at 12 instead, right?
All right.
Um, but I think otherwise, like in terms of general sort of feedback that we heard that crypto AI was a really, I think, fascinating conversation. DAOs was huge, really fascinating conversation. And I think a lot of the fascinating conversations, when I would sort of hear that feedback, it sort of stemmed around these two things. It was that kind of like expertise and the domain knowledge was very different of each panelist. And I think that made the conversation really fun. Like for crypto AI, we had someone who, one of the co-founders of blockchain at Microsoft, to someone else who ended up helping, who's the CFO of PayPal's digital assets and digital currencies team. And then we had folks that were from actually building like crypto AI use cases. And I think just sort of having that conversation across larger entities and smaller entities with people who've been in the space for varying levels of years with different levels of just general insight, I think was super cool. And getting to sort of understand how people process things differently, right? Based on how long they've been in the ecosystem as well, and sort of the different waves that they've witnessed. And so I think that made it really cool as well. And so I think we're definitely in the future going to ensure that we always kind of have this balanced sort of conversation where it's not just people who've been in the space and 2016 or 2017, but we also have people who are building and people who are thought leaders or people who are researchers and just sort of having this diverse conversation, I think was fun.
Let me flesh out here for a second so I can get a good answer from you here. What's your idea of the blockchain's purpose or functionality in the future, as opposed to standing on its own and also uh, either going side by side with fiat systems? What's your not use case, but how do you envision the blockchain functioning in the future?
Andre,
Sorry,
you
you can
asked
take it. You can take a
you
second to
asked
think about it.
crazy questions.
So let me
I
start
think
my.
for me, in some nations where I think we're not seeing fair government practices or we're seeing just corrupt entities, I think I would see blockchain
So
hopefully surpassing sort
let
of
me
the fiat
let me stop
currency.
you right there. Let me
Yeah,
stop you right there. So this is some feedback that I had from the, or some awakenings, I guess, that I had from the conference. So
no.
I was always, I went from Cardano to well, Ethereum briefly, Cardano, and then Ergo. That's my crypto
Mm,
journey essentially. Um, and once you're so involved in Ergo, you have a focus on, a lot of people have a focus on what its use case is, and
mm,
it's really what you kind of just said. So we're looking at making a form of money, essentially a form of value for everybody,
yeah.
immutable, unstoppable. You can run these things. You can run a node on a Raspberry Pi in any country on any internet connection. It doesn't matter. So it's unstoppable money that people can't control. Um,
Mm,
that governments can't control. So I'm at this conference here, and I'm sitting in the DAO panel, and I'm listening to these guys talk about their idea of what DAOs are. They're super nice guys, super nice people, and the woman that was there as well. Um, and I'm hearing these ideas that seem very out of touch with, or out of inaccessible to
mm.
people in other countries, and that kind of thing. I'm
Could you share
hearing.
one?
Yeah, well, so I'm hearing. So one of my big thoughts, and that I said during the DAO conference, during the DAO panel, where they were talking about membership to DAOs, and the DAOs that are being run by my other three co-hosts there, three panelists, are based on DAO tokens. DAO participation tokens are purchased.
Mm,
So right off the bat, people who have
huge barrier to enter.
you got it.
Totally.
People who have more money have more sway. And I mentioned that, and the person, I think his name was Andre as well, from Smart
From
Locker,
safe. Safe.
safe, yes,
Yeah.
yes, Andre from Safe, mentioned that it's a in a corporate environment, you do need, there are people that may be paying more, so, and they have more invested in this, so they'll need more of a say in that kind of thing. And I hear you, but in my mind, that's not a DAO necessarily. I think that's more of a cow, CAO, corporate
Central.
corporate
Yeah.
autonomous, or a centralized autonomous organization. So that's fine. And those kind of toolings may give a benefit to those kind of things, but it's not
Mm,
in my mind a DAO. And it was kind of, and maybe I spoke out too much about it at the time or shocked them, but they were like, because I had mentioned that, when we distribute tokens in our DAOs, we don't care to have any monetary value to it. It's a separate token. It's started by a small group of people that start the DAO, and then they put the rest of the tokens into the DAO, and then they vote to bring other people in, and they're automatically transferred the DAO tokens. So it's all done on
mm,
chain, immutable through votes, even bringing people in. And the host said, well, what if your DAO tokens end up on like a auction site or something, and there's money, people are selling these DAO tokens to be part of the DAO? And I said, whatever, wipe the DAO, start fresh again. And they were like, oh, holy cow, we can't, because in their mind, people pay money to be in their DAO, and they're
yeah.
buying tokens to be in their DAO. So the thought of wiping a DAO and starting from scratch again is, out of the question as far as that
Mm,
goes. So hearing that was a bit of a shock to me, and my thought that, are we creating, fiat's of course going to hijack the blockchain, as they already are, and start implementing, carbon copy of what they're producing over in their
sure.
side on the blockchain. So that's going to happen, and that seems to be the popular thing because they have money to do it.
Totally.
But yeah, I think, in my mind, what you just said earlier about where I think the blockchain should be going, and I think things like Ergo, where it's unstoppable, and it doesn't
Yeah.
matter if there's
What
a
matters
VC, it
most.
doesn't matter if there's a VC there or not. It's going to be there. It's going to be providing and doing the thing it's doing. That kind of thing is lasting for me. Where these things where somebody pumps in millions of dollars and makes 10 million off it and then dumps it, and that's done. That's gone. That goes away, kind
Totally.
of thing. So my question is, yeah, related to that, how do you see the blockchain persisting through those kind of things? Is it gonna, I mean, for consumers, is it going to be invisible when it's corporatized and it'll just be in the background, that kind of thing, or will it kind of split? So you have blockchains that are more autonomous and permissionless and governless, essentially. So it can't be, used by or what's it called? Manipulated by a centralized entity, or what's your take on that? That's my
Well,
worry. That's my worry
so
in the future.
so I do think though to get more adoption, I think some systems like for onboarding should try this may be not true in all settings, but should try to replicate onboarding experiences that people have experience with, right? And I think that's sort of a fine line because you obviously don't want to replicate like allowing people to sign up for banking on crypto wallets with just their email or with other traditional forms of identification. But I do think that people trust those systems more sometimes and feel more safe using those. If we're thinking about like the unbanked population, a lot of times like people don't necessarily feel safe just having their wallet ID save and store a lot of their funds, right? It's like that seems very new and just abnormal in some capacity. And so I think sometimes the question sort of lies where it's like, what are people like? What does human psychology sort of tell us in terms of what people are comfortable with, and how do we sort of meet them at where they are? And I think that's sort of been kind of a huge, I wouldn't say hindrance, but I think it's been tougher. Like if looking at women in Turkey, for example, women in Turkey already use a lot of traditional mobile forms of mobile banking, but using this decentralized format where they're losing these basic methods of identity or basic formats that where they could retrieve their funds in an easier capacity. I think there's always a little bit of fear there. And like I've been doing a little bit general research in terms of what does crypto sentiment look like in some of these emerging markets. And I think sentiment is great, but a lot of times that people sort of like, especially in Turkey where we've seen hyperinflation continuously at double digits for a while. And so when we have the sort of stellar crypto use case that we've seen, I think it's sort of like, well, how do we ensure that people feel comfortable using these guardrails? And I think that's sort of where I think it just becomes tricky. And I think I'm not the most well versed to sort of understand what are pain points that women in Turkey face. But I just think like if we can figure out a way to not necessarily replicate existing formats, but sort of use what people are used to.
So how's that look like? What's the advantage of using crypto at that point? From let's say a central bank,
Well, I
onboards
don't
some sort of.
I I don't think we use a central bank, but I think we like, for example, when I say resembling formats people are used to, I mean that more in like the terms that the wallets use, for example, or just the general onboarding interface. Not necessarily like the structure on the back end. I think the structure that we've been seeing in wallets I think is pretty great right now. But I just think like whenever I use MetaMask, for example, there's even words today that I'm not fully comfortable with,
I mean,
right?
once you're on Uniswap and with Ethereum, I mean, there's like 10 different versions of the same coin wrapped everywhere. I mean, it's so confusing to,
That's what
even.
I'm
Yeah.
saying. And, like, I was trying to bridge tokens from Avalanche to Optimism. I wanna say, like, maybe a year ago. It might not have been for Optimism, might have been for a completely separate thing. You get what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Took me 35 minutes to figure out how this bridge worked, and then I was paying ridiculous fees. And it's like, I didn't even understand some of the lingo that MetaMask was using. And, like, I would say, like, I'm not the most well versed in bridges, but I'm not as far behind, right, as some other folks would be. And I just think like that process was a little bit frustrating, and I was confused. I was like, "Am I going to lose my money if this bridge isn't what I'm expecting it to do?"
And how do you trust that that bridge is even,
See,
secure,
and
right?
so that's sort of where I think we need to think more about. I don't necessarily think it's not using the traditional banking infrastructure, but it's changing the onboarding and like the user experience, ensuring that it's more accessible. There's better tutorials, there's an easier user flow. That's what I think the conversation needs to shift towards. Not like I was showing my dad MetaMask. He doesn't know what mainnet even means. He's like, why does it say Ethereum mainnet? Right? People don't know what that is. And so I just think it's like simplifying some of these experiences, I think is better with more abstraction for some people who don't need it. For people who do want that sort of very, very low level, who want to see the more granular details, they are free to do so, right?
That's a great point. Yeah, I haven't thought about that. You know, we've been thinking a lot about UX and how to onboard users, especially in the wallets that we have. We have two wallets, two different designers for wallets that are going to start cranking out wallet designs and changes soon, upgrading
Mm.
this stuff. So
What is what
that's
do
a big
people
thing.
hold Ergo on?
We have a couple of wallets. We have, right now we have a mobile wallet called Terminus on iOS or Ergo Mobile on Android. Those are fairly popular mobile
Cool.
wallets. We have a browser plugin wallet called Nautilus, which is very, very well made, and that's one of the ones that's going to be doing some upgrades soon. And we also have a desktop wallet called Minotaur, which is our multi-sig wallet, and they're doing a lot of work on that to make that a kind of personal wallet as well, as
Mm.
opposed to just when it started out mainly from multi-sig. So that has apps built iOS and Android as well, builds Windows, Linux, and Mac. So that'll be a big thing coming out as well. We also have a full desktop Node wallet called Satirgo, and we have another Chrome plugin extension called SafeW wallet, which is
Cool.
a little more advanced, where you can actually choose the boxes you want to and build your transaction yourself.
Wow.
So it's pretty neat. But yeah, so we have those. But yeah, I really I hope the Ergo ecosystem is going to take that into consideration and really think that forward, because that does make a lot of sense. I mean,
Right?
you have to the first time somebody downloads a crypto wallet, they're like, even with Exodus, which is a like all-in-one kind of crypto wallet that holds Ethereum,
Interesting.
Bitcoin, all that kind of stuff. Um, even when I started with that back in the day, that was fairly difficult to use and figure out.
See, and
Uh,
that's what I think we're really seeing a lot of friction because
yeah,
it's just complicated for no reason, and we also see that with even joining DAOs. Um, I've joined a couple of DAO discords 2 to 3 years ago, and just that onboarding process to figure out what can I help out with was so tricky. And so I think there's just a lot of different, I think, different building structures that we should just sort of think more about.
that's great. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. All right, let's talk more about the block. One more question about the blockchain conference. Where do you see now? You're a junior. You have one more year here, so
Mhm.
you're going to have one more blockchain conference that you're going to help organize. Is Lee a junior? Is he graduating?
Yeah, also junior.
Okay, so are you swapping VP president roles, or are you gonna?
No.
So you'll continue VP and she'll continue president for the next conference.
So basically our terms end in December or we're figuring out November. So
Okay.
hopefully we have a new set of club leaders. Well, we will. Um, that will sort of take on this huge overtaking, then we'll onboard them, help them as well, as much as we can with this, and also allow them to sort of use their creative freedom to sort of design this as sort of they see wish. And then also we'll have new helpers from Cornell Tech side also come in, so that we'll get sort of a whole new perspective, honestly, in terms of how they want to structure this. I think that's going to be fun. I think it's going to be really cool to sort of see where the space is in the next year. I do think there's going to be a lot of changes. I'm not necessarily sure if that's going to be a positive or a negative thing, but I think we will see. Um, I don't know. I think it'll just be exciting to see sort of who's still around next year. I'm not expecting there to be a bear market, but I think we're just seeing a lot of transformation, right? And I think that naturally so it will be positive. I do think it will be cool. Um, I don't know. I think it'll just be cool to see sort of what vision and what perspective they choose to have, right? Because
Well,
they can choose the
where do you want it to
panelists.
go? Tell me where you want it to go. If you were going to do this one more year, let's say you signed
So
yourself in for a new term next year and you are running it, where would you take the blockchain conference in your head?
it's a really good question. So I think like our theme was building for billions this year, right? And I think I would honestly harp on that more. And I think a year from now, I'm curious to sort of see what development changes we see. I'm curious to see sort of what new versions of tools that we see. And then I'm also curious to sort of see where builders have their priorities. And I think we could sort of facilitate a conversation more again around that topic of how far are we from sort of accomplishing our goal, which is like helping those who need it most, right? And I think just having builders who sort of have that focus, I think would be really exciting, like sort of in a global development lens. Then also having more academics share research. There's a lot of research that comes out of Cornell Tech. Like Ari Dwells, for example, who's been researching DAO contributors and sort of how decentralized really are DAOs. And I think it'd be cool to sort of have more young folks who are actively building or actively researching share sort of pain points and thought processes and new revelations that they've had as well. And I think a lot of people who would come from the community would really like to hear that. I also think it would be cool to sort of showcase more founders that are younger, right? And sort of share their sort of thought process on the building journey. Like we have a lot of amazing keynotes from founders who've already raised funds, but also it'd be cool to sort of have people who've been struggling to do that share some of their process as well.
Yeah, what about like an open forum essentially, and like
Yeah,
like a 1 to 2 would be a full open forum where everybody can take a mic, anybody can talk and discuss those kind of things. That would be
yeah, I think
like more
that'd
of
be
a free form kind
I
of thing.
also
That'd be
think
interesting.
doing like a panel, like a panel idea I really like is like a failure panel where we talk very heavily to founders who maybe have made mistakes, sort of have seen the space not necessarily go as expected. And I think it'd be really cool to draw on their
Good luck
lens.
finding panelists for that,
That's
Reva.
the thing. I know. That's the thing. But I have a couple of cool orgs in mind who we haven't seen exist anymore. Did exist back in 2016, 2017, like on-ramp tools, other protocols. And I think it'd be cool to sort of have their founders come in and share, like, this is where we think we went wrong, and share that with the next generation of
That would be
builders.
neat if you could get them. That'd be awesome.
See, I know. I
Yeah,
bet.
yeah. All right. Awesome. All right. Let's move on to our next topic, and that is something that let me switch my screen here to this right here. You're not going to see this as well, but I am showing the ErgoHack VIII competition that's coming up on May 24th to June 2nd. And I personally invited you to it, and you are hopefully considering to join with your
Yes.
CIS skills.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
That's fantastic. What languages are you versed in?
It's a good question. You want me to say this on air? I'm
Yeah,
versed
that's it.
in I'm versed in like I can do Python pretty I'd say relatively okay. I know I've done some Solidity. I've done like I know JavaScript. I know R, SQL, like other data science tools. Um, basically it. Know some Java, not that great at Java to be like, oh, I would do my project in Java. No.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
But Ergo, you can sort of you can sort of use Ergo with any sort of language, correct? As you were mentioning earlier.
So yeah, well let me go over the you jumping the gun here, Reva.
Sorry.
So ergo hack right here for anybody and we'll go over this just in case you want to clip this for people in your group so they can have a quick overview. So I know we already went over this, but so first prize 9,000 SIG USD plus Rosen token. Rosen is the decentralized bridge that Ergo is that a team on Ergo is building, the Rosen Bridge team. So those will to be determined how many that is, but I imagine this will take the first prize up over $10,000. Second prize 5,000, third prize 4,000, and all participants who submit an entry will be rewarded to some extent. Oh, I didn't read that. That's new. That's fantastic. And also the Sigmanauts, the community DAO will also be, there's a raffle running, and we're going to take those funds and vote on them in a DAO as well to show kind of the
Cool.
usage of the DAO, and
That's
then funds
awesome.
will automatically be distributed based on the votes to the winners there. So that'll be neat. So the theme is Ergo is a smart layer, and don't let that scare you or anybody else. There have been plenty of times where there's a theme and people don't necessarily go to the theme, and it's general
Mhm.
too. So if we're looking Ergo as a smart layer, meaning that when Rosen Bridge is out for Bitcoin people come over and start utilizing the DAO. They start utilizing our
Cool.
lending tools, those kind of things that don't really exist fully on Bitcoin or at all on Bitcoin. So anything that you build, that's such a general, Ergo as a smart layer is such a general kind of focus that pretty much anything should be able to fit in
Mm,
here if somebody comes on and would utilize it on your chain as opposed to not being able to on their chain. So let's go to the smart layer. So some old ones, ErgoHack VIII, which was a couple years ago, similar first, third, second, third places. Some of the winning projects were first place was CYTI, which is choose your token ID. It's actually fairly cool. You can mint, you have a mineable smart contract that allows an entity to mint tokens with a given character sequence at the beginning of the token ID. So a good example of this is one of the NFT artists minted some tokens, and they actually minted the name of the NFT. So if it was like a bobcat,
Cool.
it would have been B0B kind of thing, Bob, and then CAL or T or something for the first part of the token ID. So the actual name of the content of the NFT shows up in the token ID. So it's really neat. It's what's it called?
That's
Yeah, and it's this is also, I think you can mine it with your CPU as well, so you can join the network and mine it kind of on the side and make some money off that. But that was fairly neat. I think nowadays people mine it by themselves when they do it, just to be able to do it. Let's see. What was this? I think this Oboe Flip. No, that didn't turn into that. Let's go to the other one. Another example of some winning ones in ErgoHack VI. Ergo Tizen, which somebody made, was developing it so that nodes could run on Samsung TVs and Samsung fridges.
wow.
So it's a Samsung operating system. So the idea is, nodes. The idea of having a decentralized blockchain is that, the node can run anywhere, and you can broadcast your own transactions. So imagine if your TV, which is pretty much awake all the time anyway, it's just doesn't show that it's
Doesn't
awake.
show it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It could just be running a very, a simple node or a NIPAPOW or a light node kind of in the back end and broadcast your transactions for you. So that would increase the decentralization massively if these kind of things could easily run a node. So that was first place. Let's see. Sigma O was second prize. Sigma O is call or put options. So there's actually options
Wow.
trading on Ergo that you can
Wow.
do. Yep. So that's pretty neat. Third prize with Lithos, which is a decentralized mining protocol. So you don't
Mm.
really have to rely on mining pools and those kind of things. It's done with smart contracts, which is very neat. We're looking forward to that. That's still being built. That was a paper that won. And then ErgoHack VII results were first place was Atomic Swap, which is kind of peer-to-peer swaps of cross chains, kind of like Bitcoin
Wow.
had to do in the early days in chain when the exchanges weren't there or the dexes weren't there. HODL blocks was a fun kind of thing where you can put in a certain amount of erg into a lock
Mm.
contract, and you can't get it out until a couple years from now, or if Ergo goes to $20. So it's kind of a paper hands kind of diamond hands kind of
Cool.
thing.
That's
Then,
nice.
then somebody made a poor man's wallet, which is a DIY low cost hardware wallet, hardware wallet. So instead of like Ledger, like this,
Mhm. Mhm.
you can spend, I think it was $10. You can buy these parts, use this code, and make yourself a hardware wallet that can actually
Oh,
derive
wow.
keys and sign transactions and that kind of thing. So that's pretty. So those are an example of those kind of things. There are other things that didn't win. Like one time, I was in ErgoHack 5 and I developed a mostly centralized version of kind of a payment system for devs. So you could send a CSV to it and fill a wallet,
Cool.
and every once a month, twice a month, it would send payments to your devs or that kind of thing. um Plenty of other projects too. So people who are applying to this, or let me go back to this page. There is full screen share. There is a link that says apply here right on the page. And it's just asking for some information like your social security number, your date of birth. I'm just kidding,
Mm.
Reva. We don't ask for that. This
I was
is a
gonna say,
blockchain, not a
maybe
bank.
this is a little bit insane, but
Just making sure you're paying attention.
that's crazy. Date of birth also crazy.
So we're just asking some simple things. Discord user, is this your first hackathon? Who your team is, if you have
Cool.
a proposal idea plan, that kind of thing, just so you can do it. So that's ErgoHack. It starts at 24th. Um, Hopefully, I hope you join it, Reva. Come up with an idea. Feel free to join the chat.
That's what I wanna
And
do. Yeah.
yeah. So
Sure.
if you go to the Ergo Discord, which is right at the bottom of this application page, right here at the bottom, there's a hackathon channel, like 2/3 of the way down, that you can join and just say hi, say hey. Anybody have any ideas? Here's my skill set. I want to join in, or here's my idea. I'm looking for a front end dev to help out, or that kind of thing. That being said, you're not going to be able to see this, but um, we trained Mark Glasgow, one of the community leaders for the Ergo Foundation, um, actually trained Chat GPT on ErgoScript. So even if you even if you use our toolings to interact with the blockchain, let's say you want to get a little more complicated and make a smart contract that you want to interact with instead of using like a P2PK wallet that has a seed phrase. You can say, as people see on the screen, I'm asking it to write a smart contract that allows people to deposit tokens, and then only the person who deposit can withdraw the tokens or tokens they withdrew. And it writes a smart contract right here for me. And then on top of that, we can use something like Fleet SDK to, and this code is wrong, so nobody judge me on this. I'm still experimenting with it. We can use something like Fleet SDK to interact with the blockchain and that smart contract. And this is a playground for it, so I can test it right in the browser right off the bat. So that's what you mentioned earlier. That's what I mentioned. We have all this tooling. We have ErgPi, we have Fleet Sharp, we have Fleet SDK. Tons of tutorials for anybody joining the hackathon to be able to dig their teeth into and really get going.
This is fantastic.
I hope you join. I hope you join.
I want to join. It'll be really cool.
Even if you don't have an idea. Even if you don't have idea.
Not if I have to give my date of birth though, but
no, you don't. No,
I know.
Even if you don't have an idea because you're new to the ecosystem, if you just talk in chat and say, Kushti, even the core dev of Ergo, is throwing out ideas in main chat all the time, like, oh, what if this or what if that? So there's a lot of ideas to catch up on for that. So
absolutely, I'm excited.
All right.
I love how thoughtful you guys are about the way that you've sort of grown your ecosystem organically. I think it'd be really cool to get to contribute and also just learn from other folks in terms of what they're building, how they're thinking about making iterations. I think it'll be fun.
Yeah. And even, I mean, the winners are typically the product runs, but I think there have been second, third place winners, definitely that, like you saw in ErgoHack VIII here, that just wrote a very complex paper about how some protocol should work. And now they're working on implementing it. So that paper won, I think, fourth place. So same kind of thing. Somebody could have a more general mind about how protocol should work, or maybe changing how Sigma USD works, or modifying that and writing a white paper. That could be entered too instead of actually coding. So all that kind of stuff that kind of can kickstart somebody else's imagination after you do the paper.
I'm writing this down. Yeah,
is just as vital to the ecosystem as actually writing the code itself. So, all right. Let's jump into, since you were so amazing at reading the dev update last time, we're going to have you read it again.
Let's do it.
Can you see my screen?
I can see it perfectly.
All right, let me switch to the 2UP dev update. Let's make sure I have the right one. Yes, I do. All right. I'll start off with Rustin. rustinmyeye says he's no developer. He's a liar. He does a bunch of stuff. He's a little hacker with phones, with scripting. So I call that a developer, even though he doesn't call himself a developer. We had an instance.
No, definitely is a developer. That's what I was going to say. He says he's not a developer, but then he says, here's a couple of things I put together.
Yeah, exactly.
He still created it. Still
very modest. I know. So we had an incident. Somebody airdropped a NSFW token to a ton of wallets, and people were opening their wallets and getting a shot of something they didn't want to see. So Rustin has developed a token bouncer, essentially, so you can whitelist, and I think blacklist. It looks like he's blacklisting tokens. And I thought he was working on whitelist as well. Essentially, so a token that comes in that's blacklisted, within 5 minutes, it will be out of your wallet. So hopefully before you even see it, it'll be sent to either a burn contract, or I think he has it going just to a spare wallet, just in case it bounces something that you really want, kind of thing. So that's good for if you have a wallet for a kid, or let's say for the Cornell Blockchain Conference and for Rare Evo that I'm going to, I printed off a ton of like cards that are paper wallets. So with a seed phrase that you can go to and have a few tokens. But of course, those are now polluted with this NSFW thing. So I can't be handing that out. So I have to write a script to clean that out.
You didn't give me one.
I didn't feel it was like the appropriate venue to be shilling that kind of thing. So I left them in my backpack. I handed one or two out to some students that I spoke to, and they were looking for more information on Ergo. But yeah, and I'm actually glad I didn't hand them out because this happened. So I need to clean out the wallet. So this tool kind of helps with that. He also has a die faucet and Telegram bot to distribute tokens by chance with a roll of a die. Just a game that he made. Super, super cool. All right. Looks like you've got Josamai with reputation system.
Okay. So he's sharing that due to issues with the WASM, I've decided to re-implement the Rust part in TypeScript. That's super cool. And so now the Rust service is solely used for in bots, which is already in use for Python library. And obviously the browser version is less performance than the Rust service, but it actually he just argues that it makes more sense for these bots to compare and assign reputation at scale. And then he's also finishing up some details on the browser, and that will open up a thread in the coming days for anyone that wants to give feedback as well. And then if anyone wants to tinker around, there's also a link to go in. And then also he just wants you to know that it's just a testing version, only targets the testnet explorer currently. And after this is all finished, he plans on integrating with Bitcoin, assuming that the implementation was successful, and then developing real world applications on this foundation as well.
So these kind of things are important for like community lending programs where you have some sort of, you need to somewhat know that nobody's going to scam you or that kind of thing. So these social reputation systems are can be integral to those kind of things. Let's see. We have Kushti up with the Ergo protocol and reference client, research and development. He split execute from var and deserialized PRs, done support for more types with tests and deserialized PR. For execute from var, we'll add support for execute from self-reg, and then it'll be ready for review. Made new 6-point issue is on the way. He's been working on 6.0 recently quite a bit. Updated EIP 50. Started AVL tree bytes implementation. With that, serialization, deserialization would be complete, and I will adjust on mod queue operation support. For the node, reviewed and merged into 5022. Made some investigation for the API dying when additional indices are on. Likely the issue is in fork join executor shared among API indexer dispatches. PR with a possible fix is in. On Dexy Gold, extract to the future actions still to be tested in the testnet, and we're looking for mainnet update key holders still. Checking LP contracts. SIG-USD passed update key holders address to dark side. Chain Cache made another short description of the protocol submitted to a conference posted in the Telegram group. Chain Cache, if you have time, look into his Chain Cache ideas and his work on implementation. It's essentially I don't want to butcher it for you, but it's exactly the kind of financial tool that you would see used by kind of behind the scenes big people at the moment. So think of a collateralized lending kind of note of value that can get passed around from people to people, and that note can be added to with more value and passed to somebody else, and that at any time along the chain, it could be 10 people down the chain and a ton of collateral and stuff has been added to that note, and then the 11th person may want to cash in some of that note. So that's there to cash in. So this is kind of like a compounding collateralized note that can be passed around and around, trustless, of course, on the chain, immutable. So these are neat kind of things that at first Chain Cache is going to be fairly like big back end stuff, but eventually it'll make its way down to where the common user could essentially collateralize something and hand that note to somebody. And that person then has that note, and they could then use that and add their own value to it and pass it off to buy something larger or trade it in for something larger. So it's a really cool concept called Chain Cache that Kushti's come up with. They're really excited to see him work on. All right, so Ergo Devs DAO, multi-sig tested. We received first donation of more than 7,000 ergs, which is like $9,000. Yeah, super great. So this is a DAO essentially to reimburse and hire developers to help out. Decentralized, so it's going to be on Paideia, which is our DAO suite. So super cool. So they're discussing structure and DAO rules right now. All right, that's the most complicated one. That's Kushti, the core dev. So that's a little more complicated. All right, let's see. We have
Paideia.
Yep, you got it.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. With Paideia, they're talking about being almost done with creating a DAO.
Okay, I'm gonna laugh at that one, but yeah.
Are they not almost done?
For the past like 4 weeks, he's like, I'm really close to being done with the create your own DAO front end. Right now, when we need a DAO, it's in beta, so we ask Louis Voucher to make it for us. So we give him the token that we're going to use for the distribution, and he creates it, binds it, and then we go. Cool. So the last step of this is kind of letting people come in and making their own DAO, assigning their own token, that kind of thing. So yeah, he's been close for a couple of weeks, Reva, but he's a busy man, I'm sure. So very close. I think he did that on purpose, maybe to get us. But yeah, sorry, keep going.
That's funny. Well, the other thing is he's keeping a close eye on the EIP 5 implementation work as well. And within ErgoPad, was explaining how he's digging around into the off-chain bots that are handling staking, and that he found the bug that causes them to be unstable. That's super cool. And that it uses a global transaction index of the Explorer API to fetch new transactions. And for some reason, this global index seems to be incorrect just because of, oh, that's so cool. Sorry. Just because of the bots working on the meme pool only, which works until a transaction is included in a block without using the bots seeing it in the meme pool. Hence, there's frequent outages. And so he explains how he switched the bot over to an index node to now work around this issue and to also make them less dependent on these centralized pieces of infrastructure.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, we have explorers are a little heavy to run as opposed to the node. So what the explorer is it's a layer that kind of sits on top of the node that has GraphQL more. You can run a bit more API calls to it and interact with a little more. So it's popular for some things. But a lot of the tooling now is being built specifically just to be able to utilize the nodes so that we're not dependent on the heavier Explorer. I run an Explorer. There's another Explorer that's considered the main Explorer that a lot of stuff defaults and points to, but those can be choke points on an ecosystem if they get overburdened kind of thing. So it's hard to convince people to kind of run their own Explorers on top of nodes just because they take a little bit to do, but we're working on taking dependency off that and pushing them more towards nodes. All right, let's see. What else do we have? Did I miss somebody? No. Okay, we have Rosen Bridge. This is our multi-sig kind of decentralized bridge. So some improvement to the Bitcoin RPC scanner that previously decided to not use it due to high rate to fetch block transactions with a single API call. Package was implemented and tested successfully. They implemented Bitcoin observation extractor based on RPC API. Rosen Bridge Utils implemented RPC Rosen Extractor for Bitcoin. Since we cannot fetch input box address from Bitcoin RPC transaction format, we decided to change the value to the box ID itself. For now, only for Bitcoin. We may and may not change it in the future, still an active discussion. Updated Rosen Extractor versions and Rosen chains. It's critical since Bitcoin from address value has changed. And for the RosenNet, they finish pub sub implementation. As you can tell, they're very close to bridging to Bitcoin on mainnet. So that'll be super fun.
Yeah.
Super fun to get those guys over here, get us, maybe people transversing to Bitcoin. The hope is that more Bitcoin people come over to use.
Come into the ecosystem.
Yeah. You got it, to use our tooling. Let's see. You have Crypto Quokka. Do you know what a Quokka is?
No.
They're these adorable little creatures that have no natural predator. I think they're on an island all by themselves. And I think they're the ones too, if they get frightened, they'll throw their baby at you and run away. That might not be a quokka, but they're these adorable little creatures in New Zealand or Australia or nearby kind of thing. Somebody's going to hate me for putting New Zealand and Australia in the same sentence, but we'll see. All right, go for it. Skyharbor NFT Marketplace.
Okay. Basically, this NFT marketplace is doing some fundraising to sort of allow for a new collection standard, and we can read about it on their Medium page. And the gist is that they're going to upgrade for multiple royalties and fix original royalty value. You can list now an NFT, asking really for any currency, which is super cool. Allow audio NFTs. That's pretty interesting. And update backend for faster infrastructure implementations. And if they get the funding that they're looking for, they will also have an open source front end, and they will have tiers of contributors that will get certain prizes.
Yeah, so right now on Ergo, as I mentioned earlier, the royalties are built into the smart contract, but they're going to make it so, redesign it so that multiple people can have royalties. Similar to how you were talking about earlier, where if you like somebody's thing, then maybe you'll get more royalties as well. So same kind of this. You could give it to the artist, you could give it to the person that helped you code it, a smaller percent kind of thing. So that's very, very handy to have multiple output streams on those royalties. Cyberverse update from Mr. Pixel. Cyberverse is our resident, actually fully working, really cool kind of pixel-based game. Car racing minigame version 2. They remade the whole car racing minigame from scratch, added turn road, tunnels, added road and high and low effects. Map is now randomly generated every game. They did this so people would stop botting it. Because if the map's the same, they can program, left and right and that kind of thing. Added sharing NPCs, changed the point of view of the player as well, added new background music to the mini game, which will be an NFT soon. Added effective darkness for objects that are far away. Partnerships. Yesterday, we announced a new partnership with Omen, which is a NFT project on Cardano. Details of
Cool.
the partnership are TBA. Another partnership with a project on Cardano is expected to be announced later this month. I'd suggest for you to play this, but it can get pretty addicting, and I wouldn't want you to lose your internship over.
Hey, it seems pretty fun though. I
Blockchain
want to
Go.
check it out. I haven't played a lot of on-chain games ever, so excited to play around with it.
Yeah, so the idea about this is that you own everything. So
Yeah, exactly.
you get in-item games or NFTs. You'll go from this. So super cool, and it's also kind of what's it called, construction, like Minecraft almost, where if you want you can build
Build out
actually
building
CPU
blocks.
miners inside your apartment here, so you can build the video cards, you can build the motherboard, you have to build the CPU inside it, so it takes different, like diamond dust to make silicon to make the CPU die and those kind of things, so it gets very complicated. It's very cool. All right, you've got Cannon with the field.
Okay. So the field is a peer-to-peer protocol, pledging protocol where individuals can pledge assets, either tokens or coins, to support a participation in competition. This will be DAO driven and open source. And so they have all their MVP smart contracts are complete. Their dApps and interface is ongoing for an MVP, which will be wrapped up by later this week. That's pretty fast. And the documentation for the guards off-chain activities has also been complete. And they have a pitch deck and FAQ, which has been attached here, and that they also ask us that we can ask any questions in the Discord. And they're going to be shifting now to do a little bit more marketing efforts as well. And they have the link to join their DAO and contribute as well to the field.
All right, we've got Death Gripson for Atomic Swap. That's a peer-to-peer cross-chain swap that I mentioned earlier that won the last ErgoHack. Overhauling UI functionality and moving main functionality to REST in Python APIs. Python, you could help out with this, Reva. Since a proof of concept was launched, the UI has handled too much state and direct interaction with swap APIs, moving automatic swap state handling entirely into REST in Python API levels, taking a hot reload function call out of UI and automatically directly calling it from REST API, removing need for UI to functionality react to tons of swap state feedback. UI will focus on querying and representing data, also handling the beginning of existential requests, like attempting to claim a swap offer for the first time. New Python API watch swap loop function will handle both uninterrupted and hot reload swaps instead of needing separate function calls for the similar functionality. Local chain accounts and cross-chain account selector navs have been added to swap claiming section. Let's see, do we have anything else? I think that is
Great.
it. We are at 57 minutes. We are under an hour, Reva. That was fantastic.
Awesome. No, I can yap for a while, so I'm glad we got it under control.
We can go another hour if you want to.
Do you want? I mean, what time is it for you now? Almost 9? Yes.
Oh, it's 8:43.
Oh yeah,
it's dark out
Sunday.
too.
Oh,
On
I
a
bet.
Sunday. Yeah, goodness.
I bet.
All right, so what we hope to see you in the ErgoHack.
I will.
We hope to see you in channel.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to reach out. A lot of people will already know you from watching the dev update. If you call yourself Reva, the Reva Cornell Blockchain or something,
Beautiful.
they will
People
pick up pretty easily.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I think that'd be awesome. And hopefully, if you want to take a clip from this and send it to some of your people to see if they want to join into the hackathon, that'd be great too. What do you want to leave us with? Any words of wisdom or insight? We had some shallow and deep conversations here. But go for it.
As I've told you before, I think what's super cool, like, I love the fact that this community is actively building and also openly sharing. And I think that's really unique. Like, I'm part of a couple other Discords. I don't really see as much active participation. And I love how people really love what they're working towards. You know what I mean? That's something that you don't see all the time. And so this just sort of excites me. And I think that I know I've talked to you offline, obviously, from the podcast, and I love how thoughtful you are with the way that Ergo's DAO also operates, right? And so it's just been cool to get to learn more about your ecosystem, your community, sort of what you guys are building towards. And I don't know, it just gives me a lot of hope. And that's something that sometimes you don't always get from other ecosystem people or ecosystem communities. And I think that's something really rare. And so I'm grateful that I was able to join you for 2 now dev updates, and I'm excited.
Yeah, that's very unique. We haven't been through a whole cycle where we've had multiple people coming back, kind of thing. So it's very good to have you here. And I will say that's very kind words of you. Thank you very much. And
Well,
yeah,
well, and I was gonna say, you guys, like, something I left out with the conference earlier was how obviously the conference doesn't happen, like, it doesn't ha like, it costs us a lot of money. It's not free, funny enough, because Cornell doesn't give us our venue for free. And so we have to
they
fundraise.
don't. Roosevelt's expensive. Yeah,
It is. So we fundraise for that and for lunch, and a lot of that comes out of community partners and other ecosystems that care to contribute, and we're really grateful for Ergo's contribution for that to make that happen. And I love that there was a DAO proposal that you created, so thank you for that, Andre. But the fact that it passed, so nice. And I think it just also goes to show that people in the Ergo community care about this sort of development, and we're grateful that we were able to have your support. And I think obviously there's, like, we always run developer workshops on campus and stuff. We can talk about this later, but would love to sort of have our members learn more about the Ergo community too, right? So we can talk about that offline later, but just wanted to
that's
show my
fantastic.
appreciation.
Yeah, I think people saw this as an opportunity to, recognize that, what are we doing to entice young people
Yeah.
to talk about the blockchain? Because I mean, if you go even younger, if you go to my kids and I'd say, oh, hey, they say, oh, dad, you're doing your Ergo thing, you're recording your Ergo show. It's like, oh, what is Ergo? Oh, it's cryptocurrency. What do you know about cryptocurrency? That it's a scam. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm like, we have to do something to kind of change that narrative. Not everything.
That
I
might
mean,
be fun to build for the hackathon.
there you go, something like that. So so if we can change that narrative to be like, there's, I mean, how many scams are there done with cash? There's scams everywhere.
Everywhere.
It's gonna happen. Crypto may facilitate it a little easier, that's for sure. But yeah, what can you do? Awesome. All right. So hopefully we see you there. Thank you so much. And
Absolutely.
I'm gonna hit that little outro button. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Reva.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.